Recording in progress.
Okay, let's see. There we go. Let's share my screen and we will get started. Okay. All right. So, yes. So thank you all for being here. And today, the program is basically family genealogy and recipes. My name is Daniel Ware, and I'm the genealogy librarian here at the Kentucky Historical Society. So today I'm going to kind of talk about just some different like cookbooks or, some, recipe cookbook related like books and materials that we have here at the Kentucky Historical Society, and kind of try to explain just some ways that you might be able to use those types of materials for your family history research, ideally. And the way I kind of look at this, it's more of a supplement to your genealogy research. I mean, it's obviously not going to replace like finding birth records or death records or marriage records or things like that. But, you might at least get like insights into like your family, or, or through these examples, you might, your ancestor or family may have lived in this same time period or that same area, or, they may have done the same kind of things as far as like cookbooks. And so it, while it may not be specifically about your ancestor, it may at least give you an idea of, you might understand what they may have done or went through, if they had a similar experience, I guess, or lived in a similar time period. And so it just kind of, might help you flesh out like the story of your ancestor, possibly, because some of these examples I'm going to show actually do pretty good marrying together like the family, their family history with recipes and things like that, or they'll give like a little insight, along with the recipe, and things like that. And I also want to kind of show just some different types of cookbooks or recipes that you might find here in the collection, just because, it may be something different that you didn't think about as far as a cookbook or a recipe, something different that, to bring to your attention, I guess. Okay, so to start out, kind of some of the things that we'll talk about, and I've got other talking points other than just what's on this page, but this is just kind of the get us started kind of thing. So we're going to kind of talk about, finding genealogy treasures in unlikely places, what a cookbook or a recipe could teach you. I'm going to try to kind of briefly talk about like a family reunion cookbook. And then there's also some examples of some books that we've got here at KHS that I'm going to kind of talk about. And I've actually got them in a stack over here to the side beside me that I'm going to try to show you all as well, just to so you might get a look at what they look like, and kind of I might try to tell you a little bit about some of them, such as the First American Cookbook, a facsimile of American Cookery, 1796 by Amelia Simmons. There's a Heritage Cookbook by the African American Heritage Center Incorporated of Simpson County. There's also, putting together this information for this presentation, I did see that the Kentucky Historical Society actually had their own cookbook as well. So I thought I'd talk about that because I thought that was kind of an interesting find. There's also the Myers Clan by Fran Walthall. That one's interesting because it's actually a family history, because we do have family histories here. And so it's mainly that, but then there's also a section that's different recipes from members of that family. So I thought that was an interesting example to provide. And then there's also Of Menu and Memory, a memoir of food and family by Laura Sullivan Hackley. So first off, okay, in finding genealogy treasures in unlikely places, I mean, like I've said before, normally when you're searching for genealogy information, you're going to search for records such as birth, marriage, death records or wills or things like that. However, you can sometimes find valuable genealogy information in unlikely places, such as cookbooks and recipes, which is what I'm going to try to talk mainly about today. Okay, so what can a cookbook or a recipe teach you? What's some general things you might be able to find when looking through these types of uh, items? You might be able to learn names of family. Excuse me. Sometimes, a person that wrote a cookbook may talk about like their mother, or, some family member may actually mention a name, and it may be a name that you didn't know about or you didn't think about at the time when you're doing your research. You can also see how your ancestor and their family lived, and get an idea possibly about like the foods that they ate. And I mean, obviously, if it's a cookbook that your family put together, I mean, more than likely most of your family probably ate those foods that they're writing about in the cookbook. And it might also help you learn about traditions that your family may have had. Did they have special family gatherings where they had special meals? Did they do certain things like that? Sometimes they might mention that kind of thing in some of these types of documents. And it also just kind of, a lot of these are helping you just to remember your ancestors and your family and their history and your history, where you came from. It can help you flesh out the life of your ancestor and those around them. Like I said, you might learn about certain people that you didn't know about that were in your family, or, you may learn that they liked this or didn't like that, and just give your ancestor a little more life that you might not have had if you just had them just on a chart, or, or something like that, a family tree or something. And then there are family reunion cookbooks. I mean, these could possibly be cookbooks maybe that your family put together while they're at a reunion. They're meeting together and they're brainstorming different recipes that different members of your family may have, and then they put it together. And usually these can help because they be collections of recipes and insights from your family that came before you, especially if it's something that's passed down to you. You may glean valuable information about your family and learn more about them. And you may learn about a tradition your family had when it comes to food and recipes that you didn't know about before. And so, so a lot of these, could be helpful, as far as getting uh, there might be a more wider variety of like recipes and types of food, depending on how wide of the collaboration is, I guess, with your family. So, those can be things that you might learn more about your family from. And then I was going to talk about the first American cookbook, Facsimile of American Cookery, 1796 by Amelia Simmons. It's a facsimile of the first American written cookbook that was written in the United States. It basically just includes like some different like colonial recipes and information on how to judge the quality of vegetables, poultry, meats, fish, and other foodstuffs. It can help you see potentially what maybe some early settlers and people living in the colonies may have eaten, based on that time period. What were the delicacies then? What kind of types of food were available? And it may also give you a better idea once again of traditions that there may have been. And because I've looked at older, I've looked at things, history wise, and I'll read stuff that, people did back in the colonial times or back in the 1800s, or, back in other older time periods. And, they may have certain customs that they did that we don't have anymore, or that we've been lost to time, or there may be particular foods that have gone out of style, or, people just don't make anymore. And so, you can reading things like this, you can kind of learn about, groups of people, especially in specific time periods, and, kind of get an insight of, what they had available, and like kind of maybe what they believed or what they took value in or what they had traditions of. Um, and once again, it kind of falls into the, if you had family or ancestors that lived in like this particular time period, you might be like, okay, well, my ancestor may have done some of these same traditions, or ate this same type of food. And once again, it's another helping you shape your ancestors' story and kind of give them a little more life and understanding. And you may learn why they did certain things that they did, based on learning about their traditions and the food they ate, kind of get a better understanding of them, I suppose. And that's a cover of the book. And then like here's the actual book itself. And like it's a lot of it's not written in Old English, but it's like in that older style of writing. So it is a little hard to read at times, I will admit. I tried to look through it. Like this is about like fish, poultry, vegetables, and all kinds of cakes. And then they'll go into like, actually describing and talking about the different, methods and things like that. And so, yeah, so, a book like this could give you some insight into, how this group of people or people in this time period may have lived, or how they fixed their food, or what food they ate, and, traditions and things like that. And there's a heritage cookbook by the African American Heritage Center of Simpson County. And looking through this, a lot of what they have are like recipes for like bread, appetizers, pies, cakes, soups, vegetables, casseroles, and many other types of dishes. And reading through cookbooks like this, I mean, they can help you see the importance of food and the recipes and the tradition that there can be for people. And this, especially particularly this book, it was compiled and dedicated to the members of this group, their parents and grandparents and those that came before them. And so a lot of these cookbooks, especially like this one, it can pay homage to those that came before them. And it can also help create a connection to your family and your other ancestors. If they wrote these particular this cookbook or these recipes, reading through them and learning about, once again, like I've said many other times, learning about what they ate, what they fixed, and the fact that your ancestor may have like written this exact recipe down, and you're reading it, generations later, it can create a sense of a connection, being like, okay, well, my ancestor did this, or they fixed this food because they were in a trying time, or they, that there could be different reasons that they really took to cooking or a particular food that may have been a comfort food. And learning about that and learning why they did what they did, it can really create a connection. And there's like the cover, and then once again, here is the actual book itself. And kind of like what I was saying, because like on their like introduction page, I mean, they say like this cookbook is compiled and dedicated to the memory of our parents and grandparents. It is a blessing to have had ancestors who put together culinaries which would sustain nutrition, provide caring, and render strength to the body. Family meal was a very important entity because it unified the family at least 2 or 3 times a day. The meal was not only for physical nourishment, but it was also a time for teaching and emphasizing moral and spiritual values. And then like at the end of the introduction, they were basically saying like, we hope you will recall fond memories of bygone days as you read, use, and enjoy the delicious recipes that are included in this wonderful collection. So that's kind of the stuff, like that's kind of what I'm meaning. It's like, you can learn like that your ancestors and the family came before really took the meal and the recipes seriously into heart, because yeah, like this book states, it wasn't necessarily about like just the food itself and the physical nourishment. It was also a time where family could meet together at the table and talk and discuss things and that kind of stuff as well. And then just kind of also showing you, and basically, this is how like their recipes are listed out, is kind of like this, just typed out and everything, and pretty straightforward with all the ingredients and things like that. But yeah, so I wanted to show some of these different examples to kind of give you an example of like time periods or the importance of the connection with family and things like that. And besides, you might potentially learn names or insights into your family. It's just that connection as well. Yeah, and then there's the Kentucky Historical Society cookbook, and this was back in 1986. That was the 150th anniversary of KHS. And so around that time, they decided to put together a commemoration of that anniversary. And so then once they started that, by 1988, they had put together a cookbook. And it's a part of this celebration that began a couple of years before. And it is family recipes that were provided by many KHS members who wish to participate in this special project. And I think it's a great project because it provides examples of like different types of recipes. And, it can kind of, you may see how there's different tastes and recipes and traditions that vary depending on the region or location, because these are from like all over the place. Not just from one particular group of people or one area. So, you kind of get a little variety on, what, somebody more in the South, Southern area versus a Northern area, you kind of get a little insight into like a region or location and how, what kind of food or traditions did they, hold up to, to be, the big thing that they really gravitate towards. And there's that cover. And here's the actual book. And like it's kind of like the others where it's it's separated by like main dishes or desserts or things like that. Let's see. But I do like also that I do want to point out with like this book too, is like in the section main dishes, there's like reflections on cooking Kentucky style. And so, it's, people provided information. Like this was from a Buddy Thompson from Lexington, Kentucky. And he, talks about, he reflects on cooking and eating outdoors. And and how back in the 1920s and 30s, his father would come home from work and they'd say, let's eat out tonight, and they'd get a big picnic basket and they'd I think like grill out and have like a picnic basically. And so like once again, this is another thing you might find in looking at cookbooks or looking at recipes, is you might see like you might get little insights into traditions or things that they did, like that person, his father would come home from work and they'd go and have a picnic, and that was a cherished memory of his from his childhood. And so that's valuable things that you may not necessarily always see when looking through cookbooks, but it can be an extra treasure as far as genealogy work goes. Um, And then we've got the Myers Clan by Fran Walthall. Like I said previously, it's a family history. However, it does provide a collection of family recipes in the back of it. And actually, the author of the family history, they sent out a letter to members of the Meyer family to provide family recipes. And so then, this kind of in a sense can be an example of like a family connection or a reunion of sorts, because you're having people write to you like some of their traditions or their recipes, and then you're collecting it together as one cohesive unit. And then, this may help you see the variety that even just one family may have had when it came to recipes, and depending on the location of where they're living or where they're from or the time period that they're living in, there may be older members of the family that have an older tradition or an older recipe versus a more later family member that, may have something newer or something different. And, depending on where they're living, because from what I understand, they kind of sent it out to just all over the place, all over the country. And then it's a lot of like our family histories are kind of binded together like this. There's not really anything going, which I mean, a lot of these are the family histories are donated to us too. But usually we use these for like, helping, figure out where branches of family members may have migrated to or from, and other things like that. And a lot of times I don't come across recipes in these books, so that's why I wanted to showcase this one, because I don't see that a lot. But let me get to the back here. But yeah, here's the letter that they typed up and sent out. And of course, this was back in like the late 70s or early 80s. I can't remember what the exact date was, but yeah. And basically it just kind of asks certain questions and they would answer it and provide like their recipe. And then it'll also have like a recipe, but it'll have comments from those family members. So you get a little story or a little insight into, why this particular recipe was so important, or, who it fed or things like that. So you get the recipe and you learn about what made that, but then you also get a little background story as well. And then we've got Of Menu and Memory, a memoir of food and family by Laura Sullivan Hackley. This basically is a celebration of a marriage, also with a sense of the family involved as well. One thing I did like about this as well is it does have snippets of like stories that were told by individuals or family members that were recorded along with the recipes. It does help flesh out the lives of your family and ancestors. Like I've previously said, it can kind of, it can explain things and give your family life, and give you a better idea of how they lived, what they ate, and maybe some of the traditions they had. And so here's it right here. And kind of like what I was saying, like there's like little like stories or little snippets, little things here along with the recipe. And so you get a little insight. And so that's nice. I do like that, because then that gives you kind of a little bit of a story or a little explanation behind that particular recipe or a tradition or things like that. And then also I was trying to provide some things that we have in our archives as well. Such as there's this handwritten manuscript cookbook that was possibly handwritten by a woman's club in Frankfort, Kentucky. And it may have been created in the 19th century. It is basically a compilation of different recipes that were donated by various women. And once again, this is another example of a book that could help you see like different types of food and recipes and the tradition that these women and their families may have had, and help paint a picture for what your ancestor may have experienced in this time period. They may have written a cookbook similar to this, or they may have eaten some of these same types of foods or done some of these traditions. And, if they lived in this particular, time period, and so that's a picture of the outside of it. It's a pretty old, it's falling apart. I had to be careful with it. Um, but I wanted to kind of show you what that looked like. And then, yeah, like it's like original, like the handwritten, like I previously mentioned. So it's not like all typed up and bounded together like the other books I was showing. Um, but like I guess some puddings and cakes and things like that. Um, and so I just wanted to kind of show this also just to see a more original like manuscript, um, that you could potentially see if you came here to, look in our archives. And there's also a Barbara Henritz cookbook collection, that took place, like the collection as a whole is between 1935 and 1996. Then the cookbook and recipe book is connected to that family, and it was written in 1935, and it itself is entitled the Harlan Cookbook. And it was edited by Women of Parent Teachers Association Junior High Department. And it shows basically some of the recipes they made, and you can learn like what kind of food they ate, and back in the 30s potentially, and you get some insight on how they lived and the traditions they had. And if you have ancestors or family that lived back in the 30s, you may understand kind of some of the things that they did, or the food they ate, or the food that they made, especially in the 30s. And that's a cover for it. And then also another thing that was kind of neat about like seeing some of these particular books is sometimes you'll see like advertisement for like businesses of the time as well. So besides, learning about like particular foods, you might see what types of, businesses were around in that time period, what was being promoted and things like that. Um, and so, I thought that was kind of interesting and neat as well. Um, but let's see. But yeah, and like in the beginning, in their appreciation section, they talk about that this book consists of practical and tested recipes by many of the best housekeepers of Harlan and neighboring towns. And so, it's like sometimes you can kind of learn about who the people were that were providing this information, or who this was geared towards particularly as well. And then there's this one, the main collection is a bunch of political memorabilia. So a lot of it doesn't really have anything to do with this subject matter, but there was a congressional cookbook that I did see in this collection that I thought I would point out, because once again, it's something that you wouldn't normally think about as far as like cookbooks and recipes. This is part of the Robert Westerman political collection. It's from 1850 to 2018, but the bulk of the collection is from 1960 to 2018. And the collection is mainly of rack cards, mailers, posters, sample ballots, inauguration programs, and other political memorabilia. Excuse me. However, there is also includes a Gene Snyder congressional cookbook from around 1967. And you can kind of get an idea of some recipes that may be from specific states or regions. Because I did look through it, and like some of the pages, it would be like there was like a recipe from like Kentucky, or a recipe from like South Carolina. And so it's like it may give you an idea of like what particular regions, especially like in the 60s, what one of their big dishes may have been, or what that kind of thing. So it can paint a picture potentially of life in the 1960s, especially like looking at some of the things that they mention in this book, and things like that. And this even shows proof that even like government, politics, they kind of would get into the food cookbook recipe arena from time to time. Um, and it also interesting enough is you may have an idea of like what even a big historical figure such as Eisenhower, what he may have eaten potentially. Um, and then like here's on the left is the cover, and then on the right side there's a preface, and they talk about it's our hope that as you read this cookbook and use its recipes, you will enjoy cooking, which is one of the few things not yet regulated by the federal government, which I thought was interesting to point out that they're really, pushing that because this is a very GOP Republican party, I think, cookbook, but so with it being very political, they are going to, talk about political matters and things like that. But I just thought that that note at the end was really interesting that they, really pressed that in their preface. But then, like I was saying previously, like there's like, each state has like their own little section, and there will be like their, I guess it's through their particular representative, I guess it's their favorite recipe or a recipe that they or that, somebody in their, connected to them provided for this cookbook. So you kind of get a idea of a variety depending on, the person or the location or the state, what one of their big, favorite types of food or recipe were. And then, like I was pointing out Eisenhower, because there's actually well, it's General Eisenhower's beef stew. To be fair, there's no actual mentioning of whether, he ate that or that was like provided specifically by him. It may just be called that, but, it's just kind of interesting seeing, especially before, how it's General Eisenhower's beef stew and, it at least gives you a little like what some famous historical figure may have eaten potentially, just a little variety, a little, just to show you that it's not all just like, regular families that are putting together their traditions. There's also the, the political, individuals and governments and things like that that are also doing this as well from time to time. And that really is about it. This is my contact information. Like I said before, my name is Daniel Ware and I'm the genealogy librarian. My email is daniel.ware@ky.gov. And my work phone number is 502-782-8098. And if you have any questions after today, after this presentation's over, you can contact me with, if you have a question or if you're wanting a copy of this presentation, the slideshow, I can also email that to you as well. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you very much. And here's just the referencing like the physical books that I talked about as well. And I guess if you've got any questions, you can. Oh, okay, you left. All right, thank you. Yeah, that's cool.